Hey yo, what's up, fuckers? It is Vanta on the CB650F. I was surprised. I was on the motorcycle subreddit, the lame one, not the popular one, because I'm banned for calling someone a nignog, which they misinterpreted as a racial slur, but no, it's just a misspelling of ding dong. But whatever, I'm not upset about it. But yeah, I just found out that this, people desire this engine. It's like a dream bike for a lot of people. I'm not sure what the engine itself is called. I just call it the CB650 engine. Although there's been a lot of iterations of the CB650 engine in the past. This is just the most current iteration. Well, technically, the new R version is a new iteration because it's been, they upgraded the valve train for more power. Made it a bit lighter, but you're only getting like a 10% increase, which in the world of engineering, that's just barely enough to make it significant. Once you go below 10%, it's not significant. But for street duty, what this bike currently offers in its stock form, more than enough. And every time I take my bike to the shop to get, like maintenance that I don't want to do myself for safety reasons, like the chain or the, not cleaning the chain, but installing the chain or valves, they're always like, bro, put a fucking exhaust on that thing. You're going to get so much more torque. Like, fuck the horsepower, I already got plenty, but you're going to get so much more torque. And I'm like, oh, fuck, man. Like, it does not have crazy amount of torque, but it's got about 50 pound-feet of torque, which in the biking world, that's good enough. That's not like 300 level of torque where it's kind of fucking non-existent, like 30 pound-feet. And it's not, it's fast enough to outpace cars. It's fast enough. It's pretty much suitable for my needs, for my capabilities. 50 pound-feet. It's technically like 46, but you can't really tell the difference, to be honest. And again, that's why the new R engine, even though it's upgraded and stuff, it's like, do you really need that extra 5 pound-feet? No, not really. Let me focus a bit because I gotta swerve. Yeah, you see, that's. Why do I need more torque than that? But again, eventually I might upgrade the exhaust, put an Akrapovic. I pronounce it wrong all the time. I cannot pronounce it the correct ways. Akrapovic. I just call it Akrapovic. Fuck. The Acra exhaust, with the fuel controller, it might cost about $1,500. And just looking at the way it's mounted into the bike, it's hidden behind the radiator. It doesn't look fun to install. Plus, I think it makes the bike, I don't like the look of it at the baffle end of the exhaust. It in regards to the other exhausts that are being offered for this bike, the Akrapovic is the best looking, and it's the most stock looking of the bike, because I think the stock exhaust is the best looking one on this bike. There's like the RC Racing or whatever the fuck it's called, the Leo Vinci exhaust. They all sound just as nice as the Akrapovic, maybe a little bit louder, but they mount onto the passenger, what they call it, the passenger foot pegs, as opposed to underneath the engine, which I don't like that look. It looks like it's just slapped on there. But the Akrapovic does look nice because it retains that form factor of the original exhaust. But again, don't need to upgrade that. The next big upgrade I absolutely want to do is like either fabricate my own stunt cage or some kind of crash protection, because this bike, its weakest point of crash in a crash are going to be the handlebars. And they have a tendency to bend and dent the gas tank when you drop it, even at like slow speeds. You know, this is the second tank that this bike has that's been installed on here because of that. Because every time you drop it, it just gives it a nasty dent. Which right now, the dent's kind of bearable. I'm just gonna, you know, mask it up with, you know, whatever I can. Maybe take it to a collision shop. Hopefully they can pull out the dent, because it's a very easy, manageable dent. But in other situations, you know, you got this nasty dent. There's no way you can pull it out. But yeah, I do want to install some crash protection so I can ride this bike a bit harder. Granted, yes, it's going to add a bit more weight, unfortunately. And this bike is overweight as it is. Yeah, but it is overweight as it is. At stock form, it weighs pretty close to 430 pounds. Plus, I added the tail rack. The GV tail rack, which is extremely hard to find for this particular model. The CB650F model was very unpopular here in the US, unlike the CB650R, and because of that, there's not a lot of aftermarket when it comes to luggage or crash protection. So you just kind of have to hope that whatever works for the newer models will fit on this model. But luckily I was able to find a year-specific luggage rack for this, which adds another maybe 20-25 pounds. So this bike currently weighs pretty close to 450 pounds. That's Harley Davidson territory. That's I mean, the leader bikes don't even weigh that much anymore. They weigh like sub 400 now. I was actually kind of surprised when I looked at the specs of like the Suzuki Gixxer and stuff, and I was like, what the fuck? They weigh like 380. What? That makes, I don't want to say it doesn't make any sense, but like compared to this bike, it's like, where is the weight coming from? And I believe it maybe is coming from the frame. You know, they don't use aluminum. They use cheaper steel instead, which is fine. You know, that it isn't, this bike is expensive as it is, so I can, and you know, I guess they were just trying to do what they can to keep it more approachable for buyers. Because MSRP, this thing MSRP for $8,500, but after dealer fees and stuff here in California, you're probably paying close to $11,000. Which this bike being advertised as a beginner bike, which it's not, highly discourage anyone from starting off on this bike. In fact, there's a few celebrities that started, you know, YouTube celebrities that started off with this bike thinking it was a beginner bike, and they fucking hate riding. They're like, oh my god, this. You know, this is not like the little 150s in the motorcycle course that I took. This thing's top heavy. It requires a lot more respect, a lot more finesse. I'm like, yeah, it's because it's not a beginner bike. It's like a fucking. I don't understand how you think. Like, how do you go from, you know, 30 horsepower being a beginner bike to fucking 80? Like that's more than double. There's no way. This is like superbike territory, you know, 20 years ago. In fact, way more capable than superbikes 20 years ago, without a doubt. You know, before the Gixxer came into the scene and fucking just changed everything about superbikes. But yeah, I mean, that's cool that knowing that this is a dream bike for a lot of people. It definitely was for me when I first saw it back in like 2016 or whatever. I saw the 2014 version in the showroom floor because, again, it was an unpopular model. It didn't sell well, and it came in the Honda Rally colors, which is like the red, white, and blue with the gold rims. Like, oh my god, that looks so fucking amazing. You know, the best looking one, because I don't think the colors after that looked all that nice. Oh, smacked that guy's mirror. Whoops. And the same can be said about the new models, the CB650Rs. I think the Neo Retro it's gonna look dated in a few years. Granted, the CB650R, the CB1100, the CB1100 and all its variants, and the Kawasaki Z900 RS, those bikes pull off the retro look really well. Unlike the Yamaha XSR or the SCR or fucking even Triumph, even though it's not neo retro, it actually is a retro bike. It just doesn't look good anymore. It just, yeah, I mean, I don't like the looks of it. Unlike, you know, with the modern takes of, or where the design philosophy of modern bikes are going, with especially like the MT-09, the brand new one with the tiny headlight. Like, I love the way it's going with that. It's not going to look dated in like 10 or 15 years. It's going to look like appropriate. Kind of how sport bikes never aged since the 2004s, since 2005s. You know, you can get a old Gixxer. You know, I'm fixated over the Gixxer, but you can get an old CBR, or as they were called, the Hurricane back then, an old R1 from the early days of super bikes back then, and it still just looks just as nice as they do now. Granted, the new ones look more sleek and stuff, you know, with the smaller instruments and stuff, sleeker looking, more aero looking, but at a glance you're like, oh yeah, the same exact bike. Like, there's very little difference between them, because you got the fairing that just kind of shrouds all the old technology. You know, so the sport bike is the timeless look. And I feel like the way naked bikes are going now, with like the smaller headlights and the smaller everything, the tail, it's going to be a timeless look for a while, for like at least another 15 years. You're not going to be able to distinguish the difference between what they currently look like as of today and in 15 years. That's even if motorcycles continue to be produced in 15 years, because it's harder for manufacturers to provide to produce or manufacture bikes for the U.S. market, because or just like the first world market, because of how stringent the emissions are. And that's very unfortunate, but you know, that's just the way it goes, I guess. Knowing my bike's gonna be a fucking relic, a vintage fucking dinosaur in the very near future, because of just the way the emission laws are going. But yeah, I mean, it's very strange what Honda did with this bike, because it was so unpopular here in the U.S. I mean, granted, they do it with a lot of bikes, where if it's not popular here in the U.S., they'll just fucking axe it out of out of the U.S. lineup. They do it a lot with their experimental bikes. For example, like, I mean, there's a lot of examples. Here's a little dog. Like the fucking the bike that was featured in what's the fucking anime called? Acura, and it was a movie too, the fucking Ghost in the Shell. It was a Honda bike designed to kind of look like that, like the Acura bike. Does not look cool in person, but if you were to mod it like they do in the movie, it does look nice, but still, it just isn't, you know, it's got a DCT transmission. There's the successor to the Silverwing, I believe. No, the VFR. It was called the CTX 1300 or something. So it's got a transverse V4. So the cylinders are poking out of the side as opposed to in the frame. It's like a master class. It's pretty much just as competent or more competent than the Goldwing, but with the V4 engine as opposed to the flat 6. That one was only available in the US for a handful of years because it was so unpopular. It was very expensive, because V4s are very expensive to manufacture. You got a lot more parts. You know, you're segmenting the drivetrain essentially from an inline four, so that requires more parts, more R&D to engineer. So it was very expensive. It didn't look all that sexy, unlike the Goldwing or the VFR. So it just didn't do well. So they axed it in like 3 years, and you could have gotten from the dealership pre-COVID for like pretty much like 10 grand, which is like below MSRP, which is very typical of Honda. If you want to buy a brand new cheap motorcycle, just wait for one of those models to kind of to fail, and the dealerships will have them. No one's going to buy them, and they're going to mark them down, which is not common at all for motors, or you know, for popular models. They do not mark them down. They always mark them up. But I don't know what the point I was making about that with like the experimental bikes. But yeah, I believe maybe the CB650F was perhaps an experimental bike. You know, because this engine was reappropriated from the CB600RR, which was a very popular bike from Honda, one of the most popular bikes from Honda. and they just let's see if we can detune it. By detune it, they mean like let's make it out of cheaper parts, and naturally it's going to run at a lower power because you can't push these parts to their race spec equivalents. So yeah, I think this is just like a novelty, like an experiment to see, okay, can we do it? Will people like it? And a lot of people, they were still fixated on the super sport scene, like on the CB600RR, CBR600RR, sorry, not the CB. They were still fixated on that, so they tried adding fairings on it and marketed it as the CBR650F. And it still wasn't enough. People were like, it does less horsepower, 120 horsepower that the original 600 engine uses. So it failed. Essentially, this engine failed until they redesigned the aesthetics into the neo retro look, which is like the craze right now. But again, the CB650R, like the Neo Sport version, whatever, the Neo Cafe. It does look sexy, but like in person, there's still a lot of things that just don't add up. Like they gave them beefier front forks to kind of hide the fact that it has a skinny front end, which I do not like. It makes it look like a beginner bike. But still, they try to do things to make it look not so chintzy, I guess. Which this bike, again, the way it's designed, the way they intended for it to look, it looks perfect as it is with the small forks. I mean, they're not small; they're like average sized forks for a middleweight. But it looks well balanced. The only gripe are maybe like the light arrays, like the turn signals. That's it, really. The turn signal on the tail, but I mean every bike has that problem, especially Yamaha. Like they got the floppy, like Cocker Spaniel tail light ears, whatever, that flop around. But yeah, I mean it's a sexy looking bike. Granted, this bike I feel like it's going to look dated in maybe 5 years because of how naked bikes are going smaller and smaller with their the components of the bike. A smaller tank, smaller tail, smaller headlight, everything, smaller bars. So this does have remnants of like that early, the mid 2000s design aesthetics. And it's not really aesthetics, but really just like limitations of what manufacturers could do. How small they can manufacture things, because this was the first year of the CB650 engine where they implemented the LED lights, and it turns out you don't need this giant fucking headlight unit to project your lights when you have LEDs, unlike halogen. So, but again, it's the first year that they did it. It looks sexy as it is. It sounds sexy. The 2018 and the 2017 version is when they opened up the exhaust to make it sound, nicer, because people complain that the stock exhaust of the earlier models was too quiet, which was a shame because again it's an inline four. You buy an inline four for the exhaust sound and its revving capabilities. But again, you can easily solve that with an aftermarket exhaust. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a cool bike. Just wanted to kind of talk about those things. Nothing interesting in particular. But yeah, that's about it, guys. I hope you guys peace the fuck out.